Welcome Wargamers to 2 Plus Stuff. This is Doug, and today we are doing something a little different. This whole Daughters of Khaine week we've been diving into the very rich lore of the army, but today we're going to talk about the kind of crunch, right? Building the actual army itself. Now this is not going to be a full in-depth army review. We're not going to go over all the different spell lores and prayer charts and all those kinds of things, nothing like that, war scroll by war scroll. If you want to do something like that, go check out Warhammer Weekly on the Vince Ventrella channel. They're doing a great in-depth dive-in of Daughters of Khaine last week and this week, so don't miss that. Instead, this is going to be framed as sort of a good starting point for new players looking to join the army. We're going to be using the Blood Coven box as kind of like the Daughters of Khaine start collecting, because it really is the best launch point for this army. But one thing I want to make very clear from the beginning here is that this is an incredibly expensive army. I highly suggest doing a slow grow league, something like that, just to kind of pace out your expenditures. And because of this, finding this box, the Blood Coven box, which comes with the contents we'll talk about here in a second, it is the absolute best source for getting a feel for this army, or splashing in allies. So let's dive into the contents of the box. You get 10 Witch Elves, which can optionally be built as Sisters of Slaughter. For the duration of this video, I'm going to be just calling them Sisters, so I don't have to say Slaughter all the time. And you also get one Cauldron of Blood kit. Now, here's the thing. This is actually my second time recording this video. The first one went on for 50 minutes, just me rambling about each individual option. It is wordy. Here's the kind of the problem, okay? The same problem they had with the Fire Slayer Start Collecting box. They made so many kits from one box that it is daunting to explain to somebody. This Cauldron of Blood kit can be built as a Blood Wreck Sorceress, a Slaughter Queen, a Hag Queen. You can put any one of those options on the Cauldron of Blood, or in the Blood Wreck Sorceress's case, you can put her on the Shrine. And optionally, you get the other variants on foot, including the Khaine statue, okay? So it is theoretically possible that this one kit makes 4 units. You can understand as I go through the different variations how incredibly annoying that is to recover them all. So I'm not going to do that. This is my second time through. I'm going to trim it down, just give you some real useful information. We're going to talk about each of the heroes on foot, kind of give you some suggestions on what happens when you put them on the Cauldron of Blood, and just kind of send you on your way. Again, this is about getting started, not the minutia of the army. If you really want to know what we're talking about, go grab the Battle Tome and really dive into these units. This is going to require you to be a smart consumer. You're going to have to buy the Battle Tome, plan your army, plan your purchases and your budget, and really think about the choices that you make, because they are expensive. So we're going to start with kind of diving into the Witch Elves and comparing them to these Sisters of Slaughter. Witch Elves have a 6-inch move, a 6-up save, which is great because they used to have a save of dash, and they're 1 wound, which means they are a little soft. However, there's a lot going on under the hood when it comes to these units. They have a base attack of 2 per model, and that attack hits on a 3 and wounds on a 4 with no rend. They also have a Hornblower, which allows them to run and charge, which is incredible. And they have a banner, which basically, when you take Battle Shock, you roll 2 dice and discard the highest. So it kind of gives you a higher chance of rolling low. Now, as far as weapon options go, they can either take paired knives, right, a knife in each hand, which gives them +1 attack, meaning they have 3 attacks each now. Or they can go for the Bladed Buckler, which gives them a 5-up in combat. And when they make a save roll of a 6, it inflicts 1 mortal wound back on the attacker. They have a special ability called Frenzied Fervor, which if they are within 8 inches of a hero, they get +1 attack. And so when you're kind of putting that all together, they can go up to 4 attacks each. They are fantastic in hordes, and being able to run and charge makes them far faster than they look with a 6-inch move. And we're going to compare that to the Sisters of Slaughter, the sisters here going forward. And they have the exact same basic profile in terms of their movement value, save, and things like that. They do have some different weapon options though. However, they fight with the Barbed Whip, which has a 2-inch range, 2 attacks each, 3 to hit, 4 to wound, and no rend. Now in their other hand, they have an option. They can either take the Dagger, which is the same as the Witch Elves, providing 1 more attack, or they can attack with the Bladed Shield, which is exactly what the other ones did, which is 5-up in combat, as well as inflicting mortal wounds on a save roll of a 6. The leader of a Sisters unit gets +1 to their hit rolls, and they have the same Hornblower and banner as the Witch Elves, which is fantastic actually. Now their unique ability is called Dance of Death. This unit can be chosen to pile in and attack if it is 6 inches from an enemy, and they get to pile in 6 inches. Now this is like a Slanesh demon level power, okay? This is incredible, because when you combine the run, the charge, the 6-inch pile in, and a 2-inch on the ranged weapon, they can get into some weird places and tag your enemy behind the main line. And the 6-inch pile in is harder to quantify than, say, 4 attacks, right? Like just in terms of math hammer and things like that, but being able to maneuver around your opponent's line, tie up units that they don't want engaged, it's a fantastic ability that can't be understated. So which one do you choose? Well, here's the thing. They're both battle lines, so you're not going to make a wrong choice. Right? They're both going to meet the basic qualifications of what you want in a unit. And the things that matter are what's shared between them, okay? The hornblowers, so they can be super, super aggressive, and the battle line tag, okay? So those are the things that make these units incredible. And really the follow-up question to ask yourself is, do you want to run hordes? Okay, what's your budget, basically? Each one of these boxes of 10 girls comes in at $60. So the question really is, what's your budget? If you are comfortable with saving up and over time accruing large hordes of these girls, witch elves are incredible in large numbers. If you take a unit of 30, that is hard to deal with, as we'll talk about some of the synergies with the heroes down below. They hit like a freight train. Conversely, if you are looking into something like minimum sized units, having a lot of threat saturation to give your opponent too many targets to attack so that somebody will reach the enemy, sisters are a great alternative because they are able to do a lot of weird things with that 6-inch pile and get in behind the enemy line, tie up things they don't want engaged, stuff like that. Eventually, frankly, you'll want both. For the starter set, I lean towards sisters, but that's a personal preference. It seems like they don't need as much support. And so now I'm going to talk about the hero options that you get in the Cauldron of Blood set. I'm going to talk about them all on foot, because really what happens when you stick them on the shrine or the cauldron, whatever you want to call it, the vehicle, they generally get some basic commonalities, but really we get a sense of what they do by what their on foot version does. Like I said, I was going over every variation before and it was just daunting. It wasn't fun to talk about and it wasn't fun to listen to, so we're going to just kind of dim it down here a little bit. Blood Wreck Sorceress has a movement of 8 and 6 wounds, which is great because on foot she can probably keep up pretty well with the running and charging witch elves and sisters. And that 6th wound is pretty great because everyone else has 5 here as far as the heroes go. And she has a shooting attack called the Blood Rack Stare, which is you pick an enemy in 10 inches, and for every model in range, roll a die. On a 5 up, they take a mortal wound, which is devastating against hordes. Admittedly, you don't really want her too close to a horde unit, but it can do quite a bit of damage. Now she has 3 melee attack profiles, which is phenomenal. One does 4 attacks, one does 2 attacks, and the third one does D6 with her tail or whatever, which means that this single hero can put out between 7 and 12 attacks on a turn. Now they're not incredible, they're not like, Ren 7 or anything, insanely damaging like that, but it does make her a very killy hero who wants to be in combat. And she is also a wizard. She has a unique spell called Enfeebling Foe, which is cast on a 5, and basically you pick an enemy unit in 18 inches, and you subtract 1 from all their wound rolls for a turn. Particularly great against those units that do special things on wound rolls of a 6, or if you know that this unit that's attacking is going to be hitting your large wall of sisters or witch elves, it adds a little bit of extra durability to those units, kind of indirectly. And she makes a great offensive hero. She wants to get in there and get into combat, be close to the enemy. She does have the Daughters of Khaine hero keywords, so she will trigger the witch elves' Frenzied Fervor ability, giving them +1 attack. And as I mentioned earlier, she just wants to be up there doing things. She's not... None of the heroes in this army are great at just sitting back and chilling out. Next one up is the Slaughter Queen. This is a hero witch elf with 5 wounds, 6-inch move, and she has 2 melee weapons. One does 4 attacks, one does 3. Again, nothing phenomenal, but just more killy than an average hero in other armies. And she's also a priest, has the priest keyword. I guess she's technically priestess. And she has 3 prayers. The first one is Rune of Khaine. The weapon that does 4 attacks does D3 damage instead of 1 for a single turn, which is pretty great. If you're just going to get into combat and you know it, just plan for it and make this prayer happen. Second one is Touch of Death. Pick a unit in 3 inches, and you're going to play a little sub-game. Take a dice, put it behind your back, put it in one of your hands, show it to your opponent. If they pick the hand that has the die, the unit they chose takes D3 mortal wounds. really what this is, it's a super long, drawn out, kind of clunky arcane bolt. They take D3 wounds, that's all it is. I'm not a huge fan of this one because I don't like sub-games in my game, as well as the fact that you're taking a risk and having it go off when you've already taken a risk and praying for it, right? If you roll a 1 on the prayer, your Slaughter Queen takes a mortal wound. So I don't see the point really of also having this kind of 50-50 sub-game on top of it. So, you know, if you're in a position where it's going to be make or break for the entire game, you probably made a few mistakes, but sure, it's there if you need it. And the third prayer is going to be Dance of Doom. This model can pile in and attack twice this combat phase, which is awesome. Because if she needs to get in there and do some work, she can do it. Now she does have another special rule called Pact of Death, where she can attempt to unbind one enemy spell. There's no modifiers to it, and you do still have to be in range and all those kinds of sub-rules for that. She is also the only hero that we know of outside Marathi that I can think of right now who has a command ability, and hers is called Orgy of Slaughter. You pick a unit in 14 inches. If it's in 3 inches of enemy, meaning it's engaged with the enemy, it can pile in and attack, which is huge when you consider that you can have big hordes of witch elves that do 4 attacks each. Letting them attack twice in a turn is pretty devastating. Now, one thing to note, this will not trigger on an unengaged unit of Sisters of Slaughter. Even though the Sisters can pile in 6 inches and things like that, the command ability itself specifically says it has to be someone who's already within 3 inches. So if they're engaged already, it'll work on them. However, if they're outside those 3 inches, you can't use their 6-inch pile-in to make it happen. Regardless, this is an incredible command ability when you consider just how offensive this army is. And the last little hero that we get here is the Hag Queen, who is basically just a minor priestess, right? She's a mini Slaughter Queen. She loses the weapon profile that has 3 attacks, so she just has the 4 one. She loses the command ability. She loses the Dance of Doom prayer, so she can't pile in twice. She has the other 2 prayers that the Slaughter Queen has, but no unique prayer. However, she does have something called the Witch Brew, which is basically you pick a unit in 3 inches, and that unit can re-roll failed wound rolls for melee attacks this combat phase, and they don't have to take Battle Shock. And if you stick that on the same block of Witch Elves as the Slaughter Queen just put her command ability on, that unit just became a wrecking ball. All in all, she is a cheap hero that sole mission is to do prayers and buff infantry around her. Now, as we'll talk about with some of the Khaine things, those statues of Khaine that you see on the back of the cauldron, or individually if you build a Blood Rack Shrine, those actually need to be animated. Someone has to use a prayer to pray to that statue to kind of turn it on, animate it, and then it can do its attacks. And though these make cheap little priestesses to go ahead and do that. So let's talk about putting one of these things on the ride, if you will. I'm just going to call it the mount, meaning the Blood Rack Shrine or the Cauldron of Blood. If you put the Slaughter Queen or a Hag Queen on the Cauldron of Blood, what you really get is a lot more wounds to keep them alive longer. You get the Rio de Janeiro Jesus Khaine statue on the back that if you animate it and pray to it and get it working on a 3 or higher, it can come to life and smack stuff with its sword or shoot things with some molten lava. Which I'm not really a fan of because that makes it inconsistent, right? Every turn you're not going to need it, meaning you're not going to be in combat for those attacks to work. Or there's a chance that it might not work. So it kind of has a variable profile of how effective these units are on the Cauldron of Blood. To me personally, the biggest reasons to put someone on the Cauldron of Blood is to get more wounds. So keeping your general alive, the Slaughter Queen, I think is definitely a worthy use. They also have an ability called the Blood Shield, which has a range that's dependent on how many wounds the model has taken. But basically, it's like a save after a save. But basically, it adds 1 to the save rolls of units in that range. Which is pretty great because you see these girls who are wearing bikinis and you'd think, oh, they die to a stiff breeze. But if they have the buckler, they go to a 5-up. If they have this blood shield on them, they go to a 4-up. That's actually not bad for a basic unit, especially a horde unit, who can also then put out 3 attacks each. 3 attacks because you chose the buckler over the second sword. In addition to the blood shield, both the cauldrons and actually the Blood Rack Shrine have this ability where they do mortal wounds when they pile in and charge, just because the sheer momentum smashes into the enemy that they charged into. And really, that's all you get. You get additional wounds, the blood shield, and some other stuff like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. My personal preference is to put the Slaughter Queen on there, just initially, for some reason, just because you want to have your general have more wounds to be more survivable. You want her to keep using that Orgy of Slaughter command ability to get every last drop of effectiveness out of the units that you have. However, when you're building like a 2,000 point army, the case could be made for having a much, much cheaper Hag Queen on a Cauldron of Blood, because that way you're trying to get the Blood Shield and the Witch Brew off for as cheap as possible. So I see that being useful later on, but for your initial purchases, you're going to want a general, and you're probably going to want that general to stay alive. Now conversely, that's if you build the Slaughter Queen or Hag Queen on the Cauldron of Blood. You could also conversely build the Blood Rack Shrine, which is basically the Medusa Lady on the shrine as well. And you lose the Blood Shield, but you gain a bunch of ways to do mortal wounds to your opponent. By having the Blood Rack Shrine in combat near the enemy, it's just going to barf up mortal wounds on everything around it. The idea being everyone's looking at her, seeing her, and taking wounds from her beauty and turning them into stone and all those kinds of crazy things. And so really what this is, it's purely offensive. It's interesting to compare because the Slaughter Queen and Hag Queen are both kind of offensive / supporty units, and it's just a matter of determining which one's better at supporting when you put them on the Cauldron of Blood, whereas the Blood Rack Shrine is all about offense. It's an offensive hero on foot, and it's an offensive behemoth when it's riding that thing. So really at that point, when you're planning out how you want to build this, it's about what you want to do. What I'd suggest, if this is your first box and you're buying it for the first time, starting the army, I tend to suggest putting the Slaughter Queen on there because you know that you're going to want a general. You know they want to keep her alive for her command ability. The Blood Rack Sorceress makes a great foot hero. She's still a wizard. She's still super baller. So you're not giving up a whole lot, but you're gaining a lot of survivability for your hero. And then have your Hag Queen just kind of walk behind and keep trying to animate the Rio de Janeiro cane on the back. Now I'm going to do kind of my closing thoughts here on the box, just like I do with the Start Collecting boxes in that series, which is to say, how does this represent the army that it's trying to represent? And is it a good launch point for new players? Well, as far as how does it represent Daughters of Khaine, it does an incredible job. You get a basic unit of the battle line infantry, meaning sisters or witch elves, as well as some of the key heroes, right? This is really a hero pack, if you will, for this army. And if you don't like the things that this box does, you're not going to like the rest of the army, like almost guaranteed, right? Minimal saves, lots of abilities that stack. You're going to have magic and prayers and aggression and offensive capabilities. Nothing defensive, nothing slow. You know, those are the key elements of this army, and I think it portrays them very, very accurately and gives you some great tools to start off with. As far as being a good place for new players, I will be totally honest with you, it is daunting trying to explain to someone all the variations that you can do with this box. There is a very real thing called analysis paralysis for new players, where if I hand this to somebody who's not familiar with Age of Sigmar, their eyes are going to gloss over because there's so many options. And you can tell them all day there's no wrong way to build it, but people want to do things that make sense. It's hard to comprehend all the different facets to these units. It's frankly why it took me so long to review the Start Collecting box for Fire Slayers, and then I actually outsourced it to Telltale Noob because he was so much smarter than me about it. So just be aware of that what you're really going to want to do to get the most out of this box, you're going to want to buy the Battle Tome first, study it, find a trajectory for your army, and then build towards it. That is the most effective use of your money, of this box, and of your time. So as far as a good place to start for new players, value-wise, it's 10 out of 10. It's incredible. You get heroes that you're going to want to use, you get a great feel for the army, rules mechanically speaking wise, not just representation. But you have to know what you want to build with these things before you start going. To that end, if you are serious about building a full Daughters of Khaine army, buying 2 of these boxes is probably not a bad idea. Right? Having one Blood Rack Shrine to go in there and just be an absolute missile while your Slaughter Queen stays back on the Cauldron of Blood. You'll get 2 Hag Queens then to do prayers, stuff like that. You'll have 2 wizards, a couple of battle line units. You'll be set for a while. Now, as far as where to go from here with your purchases, this is kind of a hard one to say. A lot of other armies, there's kind of a very clear cut, like, oh, this unit's effective, or you want to fill up on this type of unit. Really, first stop is going to be battle line units. I would really suggest hold off on picking this up until you can buy another box of Sisters or Witch Elves. Reason being, you just get your battle line out of the way for a 1k army. Just get them out of the way. Like I said, expensive army, get used to it. So you're going to want more troops on the ground. Remember, you have a lot of heroes here, and a lot of your points for your early lists are going to be tied up in heroes. So you need some foot soldiers, so get some sisters, some witch elves, some doomfire warlocks. Just get more models on the table and scale back kind of that balance of hero to unit ratio. Unfortunately, buying units is kind of where it really hurts the wallet here, because $60 for 10 girls hurts. Especially when those girls kind of operate in horde units like witch elves, or in a bunch of small units like sisters. In addition to that, what I really suggest you do, like I said, buy your battle tome first, sit down with it, and plan out based on, say, battalions. Pick a battalion that you like that suits kind of the Daughters of Khaine temple that catches your interest. This is one of those battle tomes where I really think, more so than ever, the battalions do a great job of kind of giving you a direction on where to purchase things. And I think for such an expensive army, it needed that, right? There's no throwaway units here. Everything is expensive, you're going to spend a lot of money on it, so your purchases need to be going somewhere. So taking some time, looking at the temples, looking at battalions, using them kind of as a shopping list, as a guide, is a really great idea. And those really are my thoughts and suggestions on getting started with Daughters of Khaine. Again, just like the Carriage and Overlord box, the emphasis is going to be on you being a smart consumer and kind of planning your purchases, because if you do, this is an incredible army that does some incredible things. Like when you start synergizing the blood shields and the bladed bucklers to get a 4-up horde of witch elves, that's nasty for some people to deal with. Not to mention the fact they have spells that give them rend and all these kind of just amazing things that when you start stacking these layers of synergy on top of one another, even though there's fewer models and even though they're expensive, they do incredible amounts of damage and actually can take a punch on the chin fairly well. So folks, those are my thoughts on the Daughters of Khaine and their getting started-ish box with the Blood Coven set. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I want to say one more time how appreciative I am for all of the just warm sentiments sent my way regarding kind of the reason this week was delayed. I had to put a pet down, and then my wife was afraid of losing her job, which she actually did not. She was not in this round of layoffs, so incredibly blessed. I'm so thankful for all of your patience and support. It's very humbling, and I appreciate it more than I can ever say. So thank you guys so much. I've had a blast with Khaine Week. I'm going to go ahead and be raffling this battle tome off along with a handwritten thank you letter to anyone at the Mega Boss level of patrons of my Patreon page. So go ahead and check it out. They are some awesome people who have been nothing but supportive and kind to me. So I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this week. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy battle tomes and Black Library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.